Shalom again, Talmidim. Here we are again for another video screencast of the Jonah translation. I heard from enough of you that this was helpful, and I think personally that it's quite helpful, so I decided to do it again. I'll just jump right in this time to save a little bit of time. And there's a lot to cover in these verses, actually, or just in this one verse. There's a lot to cover. So, okay, here we go. Vayakum, our very first word, presents us with a dilemma. So we have here the very clear components of the Vav consecutive, right? Vav consecutive, recall, is the form that an imperfect verb takes when you have a vav followed by a patach followed by a dagesh forte in the prefix. Okay, those are the three signs, of the vav consecutive. Vav consecutive can only happen to an imperfect form because it requires a prefix. It's vav followed by a patach and a dagesh forte in the prefix. Okay, so you've got all three of these signs, very clearly a vav consecutive, which would then require this yod to be the prefix, right? The yod is the prefix, therefore it's not a root letter. And you're left with only two root letters. Oh my goodness. What are we going to do? There's a letter missing. Well, what you'll do is you'll go to the missing letter clues sheet that I sent out to you earlier this week, and you'll look for some of the signs to see if what is showing up here is what you've got in the text. And so remember, I think I said this, but the missing letter clues sheet really only applies to prefix forms, which is the primary conjugation of the verb that creates complications of missing letters. There are some other situations in other conjugations, but many of them happen in prefix forms. And many of them happen in prefix forms because the missing letter is a weak letter and it's in the first root position for 3 out of these 4. So you want to look down here and I'll just bring you right to it. Here it shows you a comets under the prefix. A comets under the prefix, which is what we have here. When you have a comets under the prefix, when you have a comets under the prefix, the missing letter is a vav or a yod in the middle root position, which is what a hollow verb is. The verb is hollow because the middle letter is weak and often disappears. And the example is actually from Jonah 3, verse 3, which is almost a verbatim repetition of Jonah 1, verse 3. Okay, so prefix under the comets under the prefix. I dare say 10 times out of 10, you have a hollow verb, and the root letter that's missing is either a vav or a yod. In this case, it's a vav. Kof vav mem is the root, from kum, to get up, to rise. Okay, so again, word order in Hebrew begins with the verb, then is followed by the it can be usually, but not always, sometimes it's implied, but is followed by the subject, and then the object, and then any sort of indirect object or further prepositional phrases and other things that kind of nuance and complexify the basic idea. So the verb, and he got up, the subject, Jonah, and Jonah got up. Livroach. Here we have a couple things to keep in mind. You have a preposition attached to a verb, a verbal root. You know it's a verbal root for a couple of reasons. One, you know there's three letters there, three root letters, so you would sort of begin thinking maybe I have a verb here. But more specifically, you have the vocal pattern of a prefix form in the call, E-O. Hirik under here is a preposition, a holum vav or a holum between the second and third root positions. This EO pattern is the pattern of the call prefix. And it is also then the pattern of the call infinitive construct. So when you have a preposition that's attached to a verbal root, 10 times out of 10, it's an infinitive construct. Infinitive construct is the only verb form that can have a preposition attached. And most of the infinitive constructs take the vocal pattern of the prefix form, the imperfect form, and they remove the prefix and put in the preposition, and there's your infinitive construct form. So the preposition is telling you I'm an infinitive construct, and the vocal pattern is telling you which verb stem it is. So the EO pattern, hirik under the preposition or prefix, holum between the second and third root letters, is telling you call. Now this patach here is called a furtive patach, and it's there because the last root letter is a guttural, a hate. And hate to follow any vowel except an a vowel. They refuse to follow an o, and so that patach just furtively sneaks right in there between the holum and the consonant. So it's called a furtive patach, livroach. Okay, so you look up beit resh hate in the lexicon, it tells you to flee. And your translation then comes from the preposition, which is to, and the root, which is flee, to flee. And Jonah got up to flee, or in order to flee. It can have a purposeful feel to it as well. Infinitives can also be translated as fleeing, but I think in this context, to flee makes more sense. The reason he got up was to flee. Tarshisha. Now, this is a proper noun, right? And the noun itself is Tarshish. That's the name of the city. So the question is, what is this kametz hey doing on the end? Well, when you have a noun that is a location followed by a kametz hey, that is almost always, of course not all the time, but almost always going to be a directional hey. So Tarshish word, towards Tarshish, to Tarshish. Jonah got up to flee to Tarshish. And then probably the most important preposition in the whole book of Jonah, milifnei Adonai. Milifnei Adonai. So this preposition is actually composed of two prepositions and a noun. You see the mean here, the mem with a hirik followed by a dagesh forte in the lamed. That dagesh forte is the assimilated noon. It sort of rolls up into a little ball and becomes a dagesh forte, doubling the following letter. That's the preposition mean, away or from. Then the preposition lamed, to, and then fene is the construct form of the word face. So face of. From to the face of, which basically means away from the face of, or away from the presence. Okay, so previously in verse 2, God says to Jonah that the Ra'ah of Nineveh has come up lefanai, before my face, to my face, before my presence. I'm looking at it, I'm seeing it, beholding it, smelling it, feeling it. It's filling my vision. Right? So lefanai. Here, Jonah flees away from the face or presence. So what's exegetically and theologically, what's even cosmologically, what's underneath this is an acknowledgement and an expression of the presence of God. The Lord is located in this story, and that is deeply significant. That God has a face, and it's pointing in a direction, and you can move towards and away from it. So this doesn't take away from God's ubiquity, his omnipresence, but it's a counterpoint to it, that God chooses to locate himself at times, or all the time perhaps, but at least in this story, from the perspective of the storyteller, God has located himself somewhere. And our job as interpreters is to ask the question, where is God? And from Jonah's understanding, Jonah moves towards Tarshish away from the Lord. And the Lord says that the Ninevites, Ra'ah, has come up towards him. So there's an implicit geography, spiritual geography, playing itself out here. So you'll be asked actually to pay very explicit attention to this in an assignment coming up. Okay, moving on. Vayered Yafo. Yafo is Jaffa or Joppa, or all it has lots of different transliterations, but the city of Jaffa. Vayered. Okay, here we have the Vav consecutive, Vav, Patach, Dalgish Forte in the prefix. So we know this yod is not a part of the prefix. And we're left with just a resh and a dalet. A number of you have been expressing confusion about how do you identify what the root letters are when you're missing one. Well, again, you want to go to the missing letter clues page, and here it shows you if there's a tsere under the prefix, then you want to think about a missing initial yod, or perhaps a missing initial hey. So here's a couple of examples taken out of the book of Jonah. Vayeshev mikedem la'ir, or vayelech al Nineveh. Okay, but the idea is tsere under the prefix. The clue that the letter when it left, the clue that it leaves is the tsere. When a initial yod leaves, the clue that it leaves is a tsere. So what you know is this particular yod is not part of the root. It's the prefix. But the root letters of this verb are yod, resh, dalet. You look that up in the lexicon, it means to go down. So Jonah goes down to Jaffa. Vayimtsa, this is very clearly Vav consecutive, right? You see all three of the signs. There's three letters here, clearly the root letters. And he found Onia, a boat, Ba'a, Tarshish, Ba'a. Here we have an interesting dilemma. What is this verb? What does it mean? And not just what does it mean, but what form is it? Several of you put one or the other on your translations, and I didn't correct them because either one is grammatically possible, although I think context is suggesting one or the other. So the root here is beit vav aleph. This is a feminine singular form. The comets hey on the end is indicating that it's feminine singular. And so the question is it a third feminine singular perfect form or a feminine singular absolute participle form? In other words, is it describing something where the action has completed or the action is ongoing, continuous? And so then we have to zoom out a little bit and say, okay, and he found a ship, ba'a Tarshish. Had it gone? So the verb root means to go or to come or to enter. Has it already entered Tarshish? Well, no, it can't have already entered Tarshish because it's on the dock in Yafo. So it's heading, it's going, it's bound for Tarshish. So my assumption is that it's a participle. Okay, a couple more things here. We're getting all wonderful examples of all the missing root letters. This is great. So another clearly Vav consecutive, right? So you know this is the conjunction, and these marks are indicating that this letter here is the prefix. So it's not a part of the root. All you've got is a tav and a nun left. What do you think? Well, let's go to the missing root letters. If you have up here at the top, if you have a dagesh forte in the first visible root letter, by the way, this chart goes right to left. That's the direction it moves. If you have a dagesh forte in the first visible root letter, okay, so this is the prefix, first root letter is a tav, and it has a dagesh forte in it. If that's the case, what's happened is that a missing nun has come off of the first root position. It's a pei nun verb. Or occasionally you'll have the verb lakach, which means to take, and for some reason or other that also falls off in the Vav consecutive in the prefix. I don't actually know why that happens. So here's the example. Ve'al T10. T10. This is a second masculine singular prefix form. You will give or place. But it's the exact same here. Yiten, he will give. The root is nun, tav, nun, which means to give. So, and he gave. Sorry, not he will give. And he gave. It's a Vav consecutive. Sichara. So here we have an interesting thing. Sachar is the noun fare, or like ticket price, kind of. But the fare. And here we have an unusual kametz hey on the end. It's got this little dagesh in it. But it can't be a dagesh because hey is a guttural, and gutturals don't take dageshim. Well, you're right, it's not a dagesh, it's called a mapik. And you get the mapik when the kametz hey is not a feminine singular noun ending, or not a feminine singular adjective ending, not a directional hey, not any of the other things that a hey can be, but rather is a third feminine singular suffix. So sechara is literally her fare. So the question is, what's it referring to? What's the referent or the antecedent of this pronominal suffix? Well, the antecedent is onia, which is a feminine noun, the ship or the boat. So he paid the boat's fare, which could either be, as the JPS commentary tells you that you've been reading along with this, it either could mean he bought the boat, sort of spent his whole life savings, wanted to leave so fast, he didn't want them to wait until the ship was full of passengers, he bought the whole boat and they left. Or it could just mean he paid the fare, the ticket, to get on the boat and go to Tarshish. Anyway, it's her fare. And this kametz hey mapik will become relevant here as well. So vayered, again, he went down. Ba, what's this? Well, it's not the same word as this, ba'a, right? Because the root is beit vav aleph, and you don't. The aleph really doesn't fall off as a root letter, so this is not a verb. Here, it's actually a preposition, beit, followed by a third feminine singular suffix. And he went down into her, literally, but again, referring to the boat. So in Hebrew, there's not, they don't have a gender neutral. There's no neuter what do I want to say? Pronoun. There's no gender neutral pronoun. There's no it. So it's either, which means nouns are always gendered. There's no neuter form for a noun. So it's either a masculine or a feminine noun. And so the suffixes that refer back to those nouns will have to be either masculine or feminine. In this case, feminine. So he went down into the boat. Lavo, very clearly, beit, vav, aleph, the root is clear, and the comets here is just like the comets under the prefix, because when you have a preposition that's attached to a verbal root, it's an infinitive construct. And infinitive constructs follow the vocal pattern of their prefix counterpoint. And when you have comets under the prefix, it's a hollow verb. Okay, so comets under the preposition here, lavo, to go, or to come, could be to come, but that doesn't really make sense in context. To go, imahem, im is with, hem, the suffix them, tarshisha, again, our directional hey, milifne, Adonai, again, against or away from the face of the Lord, the presence of the Lord. All right, this was a little longer than last time, but hopefully all of this content has been helpful for you. And hopefully this missing letter clues worksheet will also be helpful for you as we move forward. Thanks. Shalom.